وَإِنَّ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Those who, when an affliction strikes them, they say, surely to God we belong and to Him we return. اعترفوا بأنهم ملكه وعبيده. They finally admit that they are in the dominion. They admit in this, when the calamity comes, they admit we are the dominion of God. Inna lillahi, we belong to God. In other words, if I take something, if I take this, if I owned it, and I took it and threw it out, and you say, you can't do that. Why can't I do that? This is mine. I own it. I can do whatever I want with it. That's the nature of property. Property is the property is that the one who owns it has the right to do what he wills with it. That's the nature of property. If you don't have that quality of possession, then it's not really your property. Now, because the dunya is not our property, we can't do whatever we want with it, can we? But we understand the concept of property. This world is the dominion of God, and therefore God can do whatever He wants with it. Now, the nature of, you see, if I have a book and I burn it, and you say to me, you can't do that. Yes, I can. It's my book, and I want to burn it. You shouldn't burn books. Maybe I shouldn't, but I can, and you can't stop me by law. So then if the person asks you, why did you burn the book? Because there's mistakes in it. Oh, I didn't realize. Now I've explained myself, and now it makes sense to you. This is Musa and Al-Khidr, right? In that story of Al-Kahf, which is the story of the problem of evil. That story solves the problem of evil. Because Musa is looking with the eye of the outward, and everything he sees is wrong. But when it's explained to him by a servant who was given knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, suddenly the Musa is saying, I didn't realize. Now I have an explanation. Well, what happens on Yawm al-Qiyamah? Allah tells us in the Quran, He explains it all to us. And then everybody's going to say, now it makes sense. The difference between the believer and the kafir is in this world we're saying, we know it makes sense, and we're willing to wait until the day of judgment to have it explained. Because we trust Allah. They're saying, no, it's wrong. How do you know? You don't have all the information. You cannot make a judgment about a thing unless you completely understand that thing. Al-hukmu ala shay'in far'un an tasawwurihi. To judge a thing is only one aspect of conceptualizing the entirety of that thing. It's a principle in logic. And that's why a judge has to know all the facts. If you prejudge, it's called prejudice. And it's considered to be a moral vice, to be prejudiced. So we cannot prejudge God. We don't have that right to do that. We cannot prejudge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who knows all things. وَمَا أُوتِيتُ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. And as for you, you have only been given a small amount of knowledge. So how can you judge it? On the way here, I was talking with a physician in the car, and one of the things that he said was, he was talking with a nephrologist, or one of his anatomy professors said, we don't even know how we urinate. We don't really understand it. I mean, we can explain to you what we know, but why it's happening, how this whole thing is working, how the kidneys are doing all this, we don't really understand it. Well, and I responded to him by saying Imam al-Ghazali was once asked by a man, where is God? Ayn Allah. And Imam al-Ghazali wrote a poem back to him, and in the poem he said, you don't even know how you drink water and then how you urinate it. What's happening in between? You don't know your coordinates in the universe. How can you ask where God is? I mean, I love these maps in astronomy books where they show our galaxy and they say, you are here. They put this little, I'm serious, they do it in astronomy books. They have the Milky Way, and then they say, you are here. Give me those coordinates. Seriously, you know what coordinates are based on? Coordinate system. XYZ, yeah, right. You have to have a system. You have to have, like here we have what are called cardinal points, which don't even exist in reality because cardinal points are experiential. It's all flat earth. Cardinal points are all based on pre-Copernican theories about the universe, but that's all we've got. So if you ask for my coordinates here in California, it's based on arbitrary points of reference, like Greenwich. Who chose Greenwich? The English happened to be the most powerful people at the time, so it was Greenwich. It could have been Istanbul. It's arbitrary. You don't know where you are in the universe. How do you know where God is? But this is the ignorance of man. Because man is in a delusional state. And the problem with delusion, this is the most troubling thing for me, as a person that understands this intellectually, the problem with delusion is nobody who is deluded sees their delusion. That is the problem of delusion, is you do not understand that you're deluded. Arrogant people are often completely oblivious to their arrogance. They don't realize that they're being arrogant. But they see themselves as better than you. And that's where the arrogance comes from. And to see themselves as better than you is a delusional state, because in reality they do not know whether or not they're better than you. They might be, but they don't know. See, you didn't ask me what were the other things that there was one thing I left out of the three things. That just reminded me of that. أَخْفَى أَوْلِيَاؤُهُ فِي عِبَادِهِ. He's hidden his awliya amongst his servants. And the frightening thing about this is, it might even be a non-Muslim. That's the amazing thing about it. Because Imam al-Qurtubi said that Sayyidina Umar was beloved to God when he was in Mecca prostrating to idols. So you don't even know. You could meet a person and he could be better than you. And that's why Habib Umar told one of the students that was in Yemen, when you go to America, he said, if you want to call Americans to Islam, never call anybody, talk to them about Islam, except that you assume that he's better than you. Not that he's lower than you, that he's actually better than you. And that methodology is what spread Islam all over the world. Because what he said is that you now know the truth, and so any disobedience you do, you have no excuse for. Whereas as long as he's in a state of ignorance, it might be an excuse with his Lord until the message comes to him. Because we believe that people that haven't been given a message are forgiven. So then he says that they admit that they are his dominion and his servants, وَأَنَّهُمْ رَاجِعُونَ إِلَى حُكْمِهِ وَتَدْبِيرِهِ, and ultimately they must return to his judgment and decree, to his planning and management in them, وَقَضَائِهِ, and to his fate, وَتَقْدِيرِهِ, and to his measuring out. لَا مَفَرَّ لَهُم مِّنْهُ, they have no place of refuge from him, وَلَا مَحِيدَ لَهُمْ عَنْهُ, and no way out. The third benefit of calamities is الإخلاص لله تعالى إذ لا مرجع في دفع الشدائد إلا إليه. The third is sincerity to Allah, because one has no place of return in putting off or defending against the calamities except to him. So it makes you sincere, because the mukhlis is the one that calls on God without any shirk. So if you realize you have no other place, لا ملجأ منه إلا إليه, they realized that they had no place of refuge from him except to him. That state is a great gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it puts you in a state of ikhlas. And one of the ulama said that a moment of ikhlas in this world is enough to save a person. Just to be in that state of ikhlas with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is a great gift. وَلَا مُعْتَمَدْ فِي كَشْفِهَا إِلَّا عَلَيْهِ, and there's no source to depend upon in removal of that calamity except upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says, وَإِن يَمْسِسْكَ اللَّهُ بِضُرٍّ فَلَا كَاشِفَ لَهُ إِلَّا هُ. If Allah afflicts you with some harm, there's no remover of that harm except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except Him. وَإِذَا رَكِبُوا فِي الْفُلْكِ دَعُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. When they get on a boat and then there's turbulence and waves, suddenly they're calling Allah sincerely. These are people that are not, they're in a bad state, but Allah's saying in that state they're mukhlisun. Because when the calamities come, so that is a benefit of calamities, is that they make it. And how many times, wallahi, you ask yourselves, every one of you right now, you ask yourself, how many times has a calamity afflicted you and it led to that state? Where you really felt, you're the only one that can help me in this. That's how I became Muslim, wallahi. I mean, I remember very clearly when I was 17 years old, I had an incredible tribulation. And I remember the night. I was in a car. I'll never forget that night where I know that I called on Allah with absolute sincerity. I remember it very clearly. And that prayer got answered. And that's the beauty, because that's the Ism al-Azam. If you call on Allah, that is the Ism al-Azam. The greatest name is the name that has no partnership with it. The fourth benefit, al-inabatu ila Allah ta'ala wal-iqbalu alayh. وَإِذَا مَسَّ الْإِنسَانَ ضُرٌّ دَعَى رَبَّهُ مُنِيبًا إِلَيْهِ. That he returns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and suddenly is fervent in his desire of his Lord. So that's a benefit. Allah says when a harm afflicts the human, he calls on his Lord, returning back to him, to his Lord. The fifth one, al-khamisatu at-tadarru'u wa-du'a, that it leads to a humbled state before God and prayers, that you're calling on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِذَا مَسَّ الْإِنسَانَ ضُرٌّ دَعَانَا. When the harm afflicts a person, he calls on us. Da'ana. So one of the things that Allah loves, and there's a hadith that Allah afflicts people He loves just to hear them call on Him. Subhanallah. It's only for a short time. I mean, that's the thing. If you just keep it in perspective, it's just like the dentist. He said, this is only going to hurt for a second. But he's doing it for your benefit. And that's why you let him do it. It's true or not true. You know, somebody when they're pulling out the sliver, you know, this is just going to hurt for a second. Just, okay, go ahead. Oh, it's over. That's what you say when they, you know, you do something to the child, get a sliver out. It's just for a second. And then they're crying and crying and crying. It's over. It's over. And then you hug them and everything's all right. And that's the thing about dunya. It's just, we're getting the tooth pulled out. It's 70 years, 80 maximum. But if you relate it to infinity, it's canceled out. So stop complaining. Really, just sit back and relax. You know what it's like? I've seen this with my own child. And you could do this. Take the child, don't do this. Take the child, I don't want to be responsible. It's America, they sue you if stuff like that. If you take a child and you throw the child up, there's a point where you see this, they go into this state of complete panic. And then when they come back to your arms, they're laughing. That is dunya. I guarantee you, that moment, that is your life. You came from God, and you're going back to God. And there's just a moment where you're in a complete state of panic. But just relax. You're in good hands. You're in good hands. So just relax. The Moroccans say, رَيَّحْ بَالَكْ وَتَعْلَمَ السِّبَاحَةِ. Relax the mind and learn to swim. Seriously, relax the mind. Do you remember when you first learned to swim? I remember. I'll never forget it. I got placed on my back, and the person told me, relax completely. I was scared to death. Relax completely. What are you talking about? I'm going to drown. No, you're not. You're going to float. Relax. And it was frightening in the beginning, but once you learn to relax, suddenly you were floating and everything was fine. And that's dunya. You just have to relax. We're in the ocean of dunya.